Belgium is a small country in the Benelux region of Europe along with the Netherlands and Luxembourg. In the last countdown video, we ranked my top 15 favorite roller coasters in Belgium's neighboring country, the Netherlands, and today, as anticipated, I'll be doing the exact same for Belgium. Like with Holland, it's amazing how deep this country's roller coaster and amusement park collection is relative to its size. For reference, Belgium is around 13 times smaller than my home state, California, yet it is home to some truly marvelous attractions. While putting this list together, I realized that Belgium not only has a world-class top 2, but also a ton of high-quality family coasters. Definitely a bizarre amount for any country in Europe, let alone one as small as this one. Therefore, there's a lot of family-friendly rides on this list, but the reason being is because I enjoyed those just as much as roller coasters 3 times their size. The first entry on this list is no exception. At number 15 is Naga Bay at Bobbejaanland. This Mauer spinning coaster is a rather unique ride, as most other spinners from the manufacturer are cloned layouts like Steel Dragon at Waldemere or Laugh Track at Hershey Park, for example. But Naga Bay is a fully custom layout that also uses a totally different track style that requires a thicker spine and thicker support structure. I'm not sure where the decision to change the track and supports came from, but it makes for a glass smooth ride experience. Combine that with some disorienting elements and a picturesque setting along the water, and you've got yourself one of my favorite family spinning coasters I've ridden. Number 14, Huracan at Bellewaerde. Another great family coaster is Huracan, which I hardly knew existed before visiting this small park. As it turns out, this is a zero force coaster that's partially outdoors and mostly indoors. As for the layout, it's not the most intense, but if it were, it would defeat the purpose of this being a family-friendly ride. The theming on the interior of the building is really well done, and I love all of the cool flashy lights. But the one critique I had was that there wasn't a whole lot of atmosphere, which was likely caused by the lack of audio. When it comes to indoor roller coasters with theming, I feel like a soundtrack or a music score is a critical piece to the puzzle. Otherwise, it was a surprisingly well done coaster and one that you should prioritize when visiting the park. Number 13, Typhoon at Bobbejaanland. Gerstlauer's second ever Eurofighter is also their weakest one in my opinion. I only got one ride in on this coaster, but it really wasn't my favorite. Part of that likely has to do with the fact that it's a hang time focused layout. I'm not the biggest fan of hang time, but I know others are. The 3 Heartline rolls are certainly very unique for a ride like this, so I will give Typhoon points for doing something a bit unordinary. It also has the typically awesome beyond vertical drop you'd expect from Gerstlauer. My biggest issue with the ride has to do with the jackhammering I experienced on the vertical loop and rather unexciting layout minus the inversions. It feels like a bit of a gimmicky ride to me, and I didn't think it pulled off the gimmick all too well. But nonetheless, a Gerstlauer Eurofighter is a Gerstlauer Eurofighter, so I felt like I had to give it a spot on this list. Number 12, Pulsar at Walibi, Belgium. Mach Ride's Power Splash model was meant to bring the water coaster to the next level, and in some ways they exceeded, in other ways not so much. As far as intensity is concerned, it's certainly a step up from previous water coasters by the manufacturer. But I also feel like a water coaster is an experience that should be given a lot of theming. I don't knock the coaster points for having only a little bit of theming, but given its awesome technology and turntable system, I think there's a bit of a missed opportunity there. I do think it's really cool how the pool at the bottom fills up while the train is up on the spike, and that's how the splashdown is initiated. Truly, that is something that the world has never seen before, and it's something I have to commend Mach Rides for. Also, the backwards airtime hill gives some awesome airtime, which was a pleasant surprise. A fun ride for sure, but not one that I walked away from needing to re-ride. Number 11, Psyche Underground at Walibi, Belgium. Schwarzkopf shuttle loops are impressive rides given their age. Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm is at one of my home parks, and I've ridden it countless times over the years. Experiencing another iteration of the ride in Europe was an interesting experience to say the least. Notice how there's no track visible from the outside. Due to noise complaints, Walibi, Belgium had to enclose the entirety of Psyche Underground with pipe-like tubes, adding a whole new element to the ride experience. The lighting effects and in-the-dark nature of the coaster was absolutely spectacular. But I have 2 issues with this version of the Schwarzkopf shuttle loop. First, I wasn't a fan of how the park replaced the flywheel launch with an LIM launch. It doesn't have too much of an effect on the ride experience, but the flywheel launch is such a rare treasure these days, as we're even seeing it removed once more from Montezuma's Revenge in 2023. Also, the coaster breaks right before the backward spike, taking away one of the few marquee elements from the ride. The entire coaster experience lasts for about 30 seconds, and it shows because of that change. I still think it's a good coaster overall despite its flaws, but I was hoping for a little more punch overall. Number 10, Tiki Waka at Walibi, Belgium. Though Tiki Waka is much less intense than Psyche Underground or Pulsar, I decided to rank it higher since it is one of the best wild mouse style coasters in the world. Looking at it this way, for a family coaster, I wouldn't really change anything about it. It's a perfectly smooth experience with lots of zippy elements, plus it's a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, meaning it's a unique twist to the classic wild mouse. I gained a whole new appreciation for this model while I was in Europe, and Tiki Waka is one of the best reasons why. Number 9, Calamity Mine at Walibi, Belgium. Our 4th coaster from this park in a row is Calamity Mine. The elephant in the room, at least to me, is that I hear absolutely no one talk about this coaster. Yet, I think I'd put it up there as one of my top mine train coasters I've ever been on. Manufactured by Vekoma, this mine train rides in a similar fashion to the highly praised Colorado adventure at Phantasialand. While the latter was meant to be more intense, Calamity Mine isn't too far behind on my mine trains list. The theming reminds me a lot of Thunder Mountain at the Disney parks, the layout is pretty long, and it just rides in a way that has some bite to it. Honestly, just a really underrated family coaster. Number 8, Wakala at Bellewaerde. Gerstlauer is well known for their Eurofighter and Infinity coasters, but they also make some underrated family coasters. Probably the best example I've ridden so far is Wakala, which opened at the park in 2020 and features some very unique elements. The most iconic part of the ride is the spike that takes place over the water, but I wouldn't even call that a highlight since the entire experience feels really fluid. A lot of elements have this outward baking to them as well, again just proving the uniqueness of this coaster. It won't be enough to thrill die-hard enthusiasts, but if you can appreciate a good family-friendly ride, it'll be worth it to visit Bellewaerde by itself. Number 7, Revolution at Bobbejaanland. It may seem like I gave the final family coaster of the list a rather high spot, but if you saw my vlog from this park, then you know why I think so highly of it. This indoor coaster feels like a rave, with all the crazy lighting that takes place inside the building. But that's not the only reason this ride is bizarre. It's also got the longest train on a coaster at 30 rows, which is absolutely insane. And the layout is also weird in that it's basically a never-ending helix lift hill going up and a never-ending helix going down as well. Objectively, it's not the most impressive ride in the world, but because of how much fun I had on it, it obtains a rather high placement on this list. Number 6, Heidi the Ride at Plopsaland, Panne. One of GCI's smallest layouts, Heidi the Ride is still a very fun wooden coaster. At just 2,000 feet long, some may say it's over before it starts, but at least everything it packs in is of high quality. You've got a plethora of airtime moments, some quick turns, zippy transitions, and smooth track work. Plus, it's even got a little bit of theming, which, along with the smoothness factor, gives it the edge over its clone halfway across the world, White Lightning at Fun Spot Orlando. But I did choose to rank one wooden coaster in Belgium higher, and that's number 5, Lugaru at Walibi, Belgium. I know it may have seemed like I wasn't much of a fan of this ride in my vlog and in previous videos, but the more I've reflected on the experience, the more I do appreciate its layout. It's certainly a bit rough given that it is a Vekoma wooden coaster, but what would you expect? The trains are at least very comfortable and absorb the shakiness. Besides, I can look past a rough ride when you have such a fun layout like this. Now, I do think an RMC conversion of Lugaru would be the best move going forward, as an Untamed style ride here would blow people's minds. However, this is one of those RMC contenders that I don't mind being around just a little bit longer, to be honest. Number 4, Anubis the Ride at Plopsaland, Panne. This is where the coasters get pretty freaking sweet. Anubis has been overshadowed by the park's newest edition, but don't let that hide the fact that it's still a fantastic supporting coaster. For those of you who have ridden Daredevil Dive at Six Flags Over Georgia, imagine replacing the lift hill with a launch, and that's pretty much Anubis. The one minor difference I don't like so much is that this has over-the-shoulder restraints instead of Daredevil Dive's lap bars, but in every other way, this is the better ride. I found it to be very intense with an ultra-powerful launch and 3 enjoyable inversions. It's also got a fair bit of theming, which rounds out a great coaster experience in my opinion. Don't pass up a ride on this one if you're visiting the park. Number 3, Fury at Bobbejaanland. One of my favorite Gerstlauer Infinity coasters is possibly the most unique one of them all. Can you think of another ride out there that allows you to vote whether or not to go forwards or backwards throughout the layout? Right, you can't, because there is none. Fury's voting dynamic isn't the only great feature of this ride though, it's also got a spectacular layout. I'm talking 2 beyond vertical spikes filled with hang time, a top hat loaded with sustained ejector airtime, and a handful of snappy inversions. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun ride going forwards, but backwards is a whole different beast. But since the layout is so good on its own, I don't think it would change spots regardless of the direction you choose to ride in. Number 2, Conda at Walibi, Belgium. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't blown away by this ride. Conda opened in 2021 as Intamit's newest mega coaster, and it's easily one of the best as well. Heck, it's gotta be one of my favorite roller coasters anywhere in Europe. The fact that it isn't number 1 on this list is truly unbelievable. I think just about every element on Conda hits the mark. If we want to get real nitpicky, the non-inverting Cobra roll could have been a little whippier, but who honestly cares when every other part was executed to perfection? The amount of airtime riders experience on this coaster is shocking, and it feels like you're out of your seat more than you're in it. Not to mention, Walibi Belgium did a great job theming the attraction and giving it its own fun music score. Talk about a world-class addition. And that only leaves one real contender that should have been obvious from the start. Number 1, the Ride to Happiness at Plopsaland, Panne. No wonder this is Belgium's best roller coaster, because it is also my favorite coaster I've ever been on. This is coming from someone who has experienced 664 different coasters around the world as of this video's recording. None of the other rides I've been on can beat this thing. I truly believe that Ride to Happiness is as perfect as it could have been. Every element is amazing, the theming is fantastic, and the onboard soundtrack syncs up perfectly with the ride's disorienting maneuvers. Best of all, since it is a spinning coaster, you'll experience every element differently every ride. ride. You may be backwards, you may be sideways, but if one thing's for sure, it's bound to be amazing nonetheless. 2021 was just a spectacular year for Belgium. The opening of Ride to Happiness and Conda just 2 months apart is amazing. Both are remarkable coasters in their own unique ways and make a trip to Belgium absolutely necessary for any theme park fan traveling to Europe. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video. Feel free to let me know how you'd rank Belgium's coasters if you've ridden them, or if you haven't, throw down your top bucket list attractions in the country in the comment section below. I had a great stay visiting Belgium, and I look forward to returning to the country at some point. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor in liking this video and subscribe to Coaster Dash for more content like this in the future. Until next time, I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.